Tragic end in the search for the Titanic-bound submersible Titan. Joe Biden's undiplomatic comment on Chinese leader triggers diplomatic row. Stronger law enforcement to stop abuse of fare concession scheme. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The search for the missing Titanic-bound submersible Titan came to a tragic end last night when debris from the vessel was found near the famous shipwreck. The Titan is believed to have imploded and there are no survivors. Operations have now shifted into an investigation and salvage mission that will take an indefinite amount of time. Tracy Furness has more.
This morning, an ROV, or remote-operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families.
The announcement Thursday that all on board perished when the submersible imploded near the iconic shipwreck Titanic brought a tragic end to a 5-day saga that included an urgent around-the-clock search and a worldwide vigil for the vessel known as Titan. Known to have perished on board the vessel. Stockton Rush, CEO of OceanGate, leading the expedition. British adventurer Hamish Harding. Pakistani businessman Shahzada and his son Sulaiman Dawood. And author and Titanic specialist Paul-Henri Nargeolet. One expert explains how the vessel may have imploded.
It exploded inwards in a matter of a thousandth of a second. And it's probably a mercy because that was probably a kinder end than the unbelievably difficult situation of being 4 days in a cold, dark, confined space. So this would have happened very quickly. I don't think anybody even had the time to realize what happened.
Tributes have been paid to the 5 dead. One of the victims, Hamish Harding, used to live and study in Hong Kong. Questions remain about what went wrong. Filmmaker James Cameron knows the submersible community well because he's taken several dives to the wreck during his work on his film Titanic. He was always worried about the safety of OceanGate's Titan craft. David Garrett reports.
Father and son, Shahzada and Sulaiman Dawood, killed enjoying a Father's Day experience. Both were British citizens and members of a prominent Pakistani business family. The Dawood Foundation called them their beloved sons and extended condolences to the families of the other passengers. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, another who died in the implosion. The 73-year-old had 25 years in the French Navy. He'd completed many dives and loved the Titanic. His friend says he knew the risks.
You know, it's a very different way of seeing history, and because it's so far away and so remote and so hostile an environment, I think there's a certain allure to it that is hard to describe. There was a certain reassurance in knowing that they didn't suffer.
British billionaire Hamish Harding held the world record for the fastest circumnavigation of the Earth by aircraft. A statement from his family and company read, "We are united in grief." Some family members have called it bad taste that his former college, Pembroke at Cambridge University, held a submarine-themed ball this week. The organiser insists it was too late to change the plan. Stockton Rush was the 61-year-old CEO of OceanGate Expeditions. His wife, Wendy, is the great-great-granddaughter of 2 Titanic passengers who died in 1912. Tributes have been paid to the innovator, but some friends of others that died were worried his craft was not safe.
They're using an Xbox controller for the steering. The strip lightings, something you get at a DIY shop. But what really did it for me was they flatly refused to get any form of certification.
Titanic film director James Cameron has visited the wreck in a submersible. He wishes he'd voiced his own concerns.
I wish I had been more vocal about that, but I think I was unaware that they weren't certified because I wasn't really studying it. Sometimes people get go fever, you know, and look, we celebrate innovation, right? But you shouldn't be using an experimental vehicle for paying passengers that aren't themselves deep ocean engineers.
The future of deep-sea explorations are in doubt. A trip to the Titanic could be consigned to history as simply too dangerous. David Garrett, TVB News.
In Hong Kong, tourism sector lawmaker Yew Pak Leung said no travel agencies in Hong Kong is offering such submersible experience packages. He said people interested in such activities have to purchase them through official websites overseas. For snorkeling and scuba diving that have gained popularity in recent years, Yew said such businesses won't be affected as these activities are safer and the relevant technologies have been well developed. In other news, U.S. President Joe Biden had defended calling President Xi Jinping a dictator during a fundraiser campaign on Tuesday. It came just a day after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken completed a visit to Beijing aimed at stabilizing relations between both sides. China has hit back with a formal protest, calling Biden's remarks absurd and a provocation. Following U.S. President Joe Biden's comment that referred to President Xi Jinping as a dictator, China's embassy in Washington delivered a formal protest, according to U.S. media. Chinese ambassador to the U.S. Xie Feng told senior White House and State Department officials Wednesday that Washington should take earnest actions to undo the negative impact of what Biden said or bear all the consequences. The Chinese embassy in the U.S. said in a statement, with the latest irresponsible remarks about China's political system and its top leader, people cannot help but question the sincerity of the U.S. side in seeking to stabilize relations. The Chinese government and people do not accept any political provocation against China's top leader and will resolutely respond. At a campaign fundraiser on Tuesday, Biden had called the Chinese president a dictator. But Biden defended his remark on Thursday as he welcomed Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the White House.
I expect to be meeting with President Xi sometime in the future, in the near term, and I don't think it's had any real consequence.
On Wednesday, the U.S. State Department said U.S. and China will inevitably have disagreements, and the U.S. is also blunt and forthright about them. Speaking at a news conference in Paris, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said it's critical the U.S. and China maintain a relationship so they can work together on global challenges. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held talks with President Joe Biden in the White House as he continued his state visit to the U.S. The two leaders agreed to boost cooperation in various fields. That's despite concerns from Washington about human rights in India and New Delhi's ties with Russia amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Daniel Rao tells us more.
US President Joe Biden and Narendra Modi hailed a new era in their country's relationship after the White House rolled out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister on Thursday. Washington is looking to bolster ties with New Delhi as China's influence grows in the Indo-Pacific. The two leaders held talks in the Oval Office where differences on Russia and human rights were on the table. Washington has been frustrated by India's close ties with Russia while Moscow wages war in Ukraine. Furthermore, concerns have been raised about the rights of Muslims in India. Biden told reporters he and Modi had a straightforward discussion about democratic values. He added the US-India partnership is stronger, closer and more dynamic than at any time in history. Modi later addressed the US Congress, where he commented on human rights concerns and the conflict in Ukraine.
We are home to all faiths in the world, and we celebrate all of them. With the Ukraine conflict, war has returned to Europe. It is causing great pain in the region. Since it involves major powers, the outcomes are severe.
The Biden administration went on to announce agreements on semiconductors, critical minerals, technology, space and defense cooperation. Biden and Modi signed off on a deal to allow General Electric to produce jet engines in India to power Indian military aircraft. US Navy ships in the region will be able to stop in Indian shipyards for repairs under a maritime agreement. The US will also make it easier for skilled Indian workers to get and renew US visas. India also agreed to join the US-led Artemis Accords on space exploration and to work with NASA on a joint mission to the International Space Station in 2024.
We are doubling down on our cooperation to secure our semiconductor supply chains, advancing Open RAN telecommunications networks, and growing our major defense partnership with the more joint exercises.
The two leaders later appeared together at a state dinner that featured Silicon Valley executives. Modi will address US CEOs at a reception on Friday. Dan Worrell, TVB News.
Back locally, starting Monday, the Transport Department will team up with public transport operators to step up inspection against the unlawful use of the $2 concessionary fare for senior citizens. The enforcement will last for at least 2 months. Authorities say ineligible users spotted may be prosecuted. Starting next week, the public will be seeing these faces a lot more around public transport areas. That's because staff members from the MTR and bus operators will be teaming up with staff from the Transport Department and outsourced security units. Their duties: to randomly pick passengers at MTR, bus and minibus stations who are using the $2 concessionary fare and have them show their ID cards, Octopus cards or JoyU cards to confirm if they're eligible users. If they identify ineligible users on site, the case will be handed over to the police for further investigation or prosecution.
In order to increase the deterrent effect, we would at least conduct this kind of enforcement action for 2 months. And we would do this enforcement nearly every day. And we would have to review the effectiveness of this enforcement action before deciding the next wave of action.
And from Sunday, the fine for abusing the concessionary fare scheme will be increased to $1,000 from $500 for most MTR lines. Meanwhile, to celebrate the 26th anniversary of the city's handover to Chinese rule on July 1st, the MTR announced it will hand out 71,000 tickets and 26 annual passes on that day via a lucky draw. That, however, does not apply to the Airport Express, the high-speed rail, or trips between Lowu and Lok Ma Chau. Passengers will not need to tap their cards while getting on board light rails and MTR shuttle buses on July 1st. Cathay Pacific expects a return to profitability in the first half of this year, buoyed by a strong rebound in travel demand. The airline said in a statement today that it has seen a strong rebound in its performance and that the group's cash flow has continued to improve. Cathay said its passenger traffic last month reached 1.4 million. That's 23 times higher than the figure recorded in the same period last year. It's also optimistic about its business in summer as Hong Kong students studying abroad are expected to return home. Meanwhile, an estimated $1.9 billion one-off gain from the stake sale in Air China is expected to generate profit for the group in the first half of the year. Cargo business market volume, however, remained largely flat in May, with demand not expected to pick up until the end of September. Still to come on tonight's news. Premier Li Qiang meets French leaders for talks in Paris. Belt and Road Railway in Indonesia hits impressive speed. And a return of Hong Kong Games after the pandemic. Welcome back to TVB News. In Paris, Premier Li Qiang met with French President Emmanuel Macron. Li also attended a 2-day summit in the French capital to forge a new global financing pact. Jackie Lin reports. Continuing his visit in France, Premier Li Qiang met with French President Emmanuel Macron at the Élysée Palace. Li said China, France, and Europe have their unique strengths. He stressed further cooperation is needed, especially with France and China both being permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and sharing common strategic and holistic perspective towards the world. French President Emmanuel Macron says Paris attaches great importance to relations with China and adheres to the One China policy. The presidential palace said the pair also exchanged views on the Taiwan issue and the Ukraine crisis. A military welcome too for Li Qiang by French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne at Les Invalides. Accompanied by his counterpart, Li inspected the French Republican Guard. The Chinese premier told Borne China stands ready to continue a stable, long-term and mutually beneficial cooperation with France, as well as fostering balanced bilateral trade development. Borne welcomed Chinese companies to invest in France and expand cooperation in emerging areas, adding that the European Union insists on strategic independence and does not support decoupling from China. The meeting culminated in a slew of bilateral cooperation agreements signed between China and France, encompassing the fields of aviation, space, and nuclear energy. Jackie Lin, TVB News. 40 government and international leaders have met in Paris for a summit on climate change. The two-day summit, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, discussed how to make progress on a number of initiatives currently struggling in bodies like the G20, IMF, World Bank, and United Nations. China's Prime Minister Li Qiang and U.S. Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen were among those attending the event.
These global challenges are increasing in scope and complexity. They're disproportionately affecting the poorest and the most vulnerable. They threaten to roll back past hard-won development gains and impede the gains we hope to make in the future. And that's why we initiated the work to evolve the multilateral development banks, or MDBs, to better tackle global challenges.
The World Bank said it will ease financing for countries hit by natural disasters. The International Monetary Fund announced it had hit its target of making $100 billion in special drawing rights available for vulnerable nations. Traffic jams have been building up around the Chonha Bridge that joins Crimea to Kherson following Ukraine's rocket attack. Both sides of the road are Russian-controlled, and the Defense Ministry in Moscow confirmed the important link was heavily damaged. Motorists were complaining of a 3 to 4 hour delay on the Crimea side of the bridge. Russia annexed the region from Ukraine in 2014. Some opted to take buses, but services were disrupted. Kyiv is attacking Russian supply lines as part of their counteroffensive. In his nightly address, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky highlighted the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which Russia controls. He said any settlement to the war must mean Ukraine gains back control of the facility. Indonesia's Jakarta-Bandung high-speed train hit a speed of over 350 kilometers per hour in testing. The China-funded landmark project is under the Belt and Road Initiative. The high-speed line connects Indonesia's capital with another major city, Bandung. Spanning over 140 kilometers, it cuts the journey from over 3 hours to around just 40 minutes. China and Indonesia have closely collaborated to prepare for an expected launch in August. The 9th Hong Kong Games, a major government-run multi-sport event in the city, will return next year. The organizing committee said the selection of athletes in the 18 districts will take place between July and January 2024. Memo Sengai tells us more.
The 9th Hong Kong Games, a biennial event, will return next year after being cancelled last year because of COVID restrictions. During the launching ceremony today, details of the Games were revealed. While the 8 sporting events at the upcoming Games will remain mostly the same, such as tennis, badminton and swimming, the previous 5-on-5 basketball competitions will be changed to another format, 3-on-3, adapting to modern trends.
In order to try to cope with the increasing trends and of the free-on-free basketball, which is very popular over the past few years, especially last time in the Tokyo Olympics, and also over the past few years, like last year, we have the free-on-free basketball World Camp in Hong Kong in Victoria Park.
Moreover, 3 new age groups, 15 or below, 16 to 17, and 18 or above, will be introduced for individual sports events. To attract more young athletes to join the Games, Yong says some new demonstration events will be introduced, including breakdancing and skateboarding. Meanwhile, the organizing committee hopes the Games can encourage residents to exercise more in the post-pandemic city, as well as enhance individuals' sense of belonging by representing their district. Memosanai, TVB News.
Japanese authorities plan to release nuclear contaminated water into the sea this year. The Chinese representative at a UN Human Rights Council meeting urged Japan to consider the concerns of the international community over the plan. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Federation of Trade Unions conducted a survey and found almost 80% of the interviewees opposed the plan. The FTU surveyed around 600 residents last week about their views on the Japanese nuclear wastewater plant. The result shows over 60% said they will consume fewer Japanese food products. To protect the public's health and food safety, the FTU suggested authorities should inspect all imported Japanese food, not just from high-risk prefectures. That's the news. Have a good weekend.